Welcome everybody to the Preparing for the Support at Home webinar presented right across Australia. We have a magnificent attendance today which reflects the importance of the topic. In fact, we have over 320 attendees across the country coming in for this webinar. We have an exceptional panel of experts to be discussing this subject, support at home and what is coming forward. They're led by Millicer. She's an ACSA consultant and is the founder of the consumer advocacy initiative HammondCare headquarters. Anna has over 30 years experience working in various home care and provider organisations, plus consumer and policy research roles. Ravi Sharma is the head of finance at HammondCare. Ravi has been working in the not-for-profit care sector for over the last 15 years and has been with HammondCare since 2018. He's joined by John Perkins, founder and CEO of Checked In Care. John has almost 30 years as a technology entrepreneur in the care industry and has delivered award-winning care experience apps that have delivered a better outcome for him and employee experience while streamlining operations. And lastly, we have Greg O'Loan, Regional Vice President for Epicor, ANZ and Pacific. Many would know Greg. He's been in the sector for over 30 years, delivering experience in enterprise and technology sales, marketing and operations, and he's responsible for the strategy and go-to-market and execution for the Epicor suite of products. I'm going to kick off today's webinar with a quick slide presentation on where we are and what the challenge and the opportunities are for that's being brought about by the support at home. So I'm just going to share my screen and take you through a quick slide presentation, if I can. So firstly, the Support at Home program is going to commence in July 23, which is only 13 months away. That's 56 weeks. As most people watching this webinar will be aware, it's going to replace the Commonwealth Home Support Program, the home care packages, and the short-term restorative care programs. The important thing is, not only is it combining those three, it's creating one point of entry, one file, one common assessment point for people entering the care journey. And this is a significant change for operators across many areas, which we're going to discuss today. But the most interesting thing from an operator's point of view, and when you're thinking about your digital solutions, is that it's going to create early competition for the new customer. And this is going to change the world of home care and, dare I say, residential aged care. Because as from the screen you can see, at the moment, the market is divided into 840-odd thousand customers for community care, 175,000 for home care, and 230,000 for residential aged care. Residential aged care operators can now see that with this one point of entry across community care and home care, each year another 260,000 customers are entering the care journey. And if a residential aged care operator doesn't have vision of those 260,000 new customers, they may not have their brand established by the time they're looking to get into residential care, which is why so many operators are now looking forward beyond residential care to home care, saying it's vitally important for us to have exposure to those new customers further up the customer journey trail. Now, with the Support at Home program, I use the expression, there are four tails that are going to wag the dog, and the dog is the provider. The first one is government, because government is going to be evaluating if they will pay you. They're going to be evaluating, have you done what you're supposed to do? And if you can report that you have, you'll get paid. If you can't demonstrate that you have, they're not going to pay you. The second tail that is going to wag the dog is the Quality and Safety Commission. They're going to be evaluating if you have performed to standards, which is separate from have you done the job. This goes to the standards of the execution. The third tail is the customer and family. They're going to be evaluating the customer experience that you deliver. And you have to be able to demonstrate not only to the customer, but to the department that you have been delivering high customer experience. And finally, and most importantly, is workforce. They will be evaluating if you are delivering the best work experience. And I'm sure we all have that very much front of mind. So as you can see, with all these people evaluating you, the operator, you need to have data. In fact, data is going to be the absolute bedrock for home care operators and, dare I say, residential aged care operators. And to be able to have the data, you need systems, which is why we're all on this webinar today. Now, competition, this is why I really need to be emphasizing the importance of the fact that we're entering a truly competitive marketplace. Because competition is going to, you need to be competitive to be profitable, and you need to be focusing on the complete care journey of the customer. You must win the customers early, and this is going to mean intense marketing so much further up the customer journey trail. Secondly, you must streamline every interaction because it's a low margin business. So delivering customer service is expensive. So you've got to streamline every interaction. You must deliver best imaginable customer and family experience so that they value you and your brand. And you must deliver best imaginable work experience so that you attract and retain your workforce. And you must learn and build better every day because it's going to be a competitive environment. Now, we look at competition, just something to focus us before we get into our conversation. Now, these are 2018, 2019 figures that we got from the department. At that point in time, there are 32 providers have 58% of all home care packages. And in 2018-19, that's worth $1.8 billion being shared by 32 providers. So they have significant scale and size, and dare I say, opportunity to invest, leaving 699 providers with 41% of packages. So you can see that on the surface, it appears that the large providers have a unique opportunity to be able to make the investment. But in a competitive marketplace, the local market will still go with the local providers if they are measuring up with those rounded services. As John is going to say in this discussion, the workforce is everywhere and the customers are everywhere. It's a very much a local situation. So if I can go back to where we started, we're facing early competition for new customers. So for home care providers and residential aged care providers, an extra 260,000 people are coming into the market each year that you can attach. And there are 4 tails that are wagging the dog: Government, Quality and Safety Commission, Customer and Family, and Workforce. And workforce, obviously in the short term, is the most important because they're so rare. And they are evaluating if you're going to deliver the best work experience, and therefore data is the what is required, which brings me to the end of sharing this screen, and we can move on to discussion with the panelists. I hope that presents both the challenge and the opportunity to you. Now, if we can round that out and put some meat to the bone, I'd like to start off by asking Ravi from HammondCare. Ravi, can you describe for the audience your vision of the home care marketplace in, say, 3 to 5 years' time? Does it match what that outline that I've just provided? What do you see as the size of the market, your expected funding mix between government and customer contribution, and where the workforce will come from, and where HammondCare strategically sees itself in 3 to 5 years' time?
Thanks, Chris. Great question, and welcome everyone to the session. I guess marketplace over the kind of next 3 to 5 years certainly look very different to what it looks like today. We've kind of seen consolidation in our space already, through the acquisitions and partnerships that we've seen. With smaller providers, I think more of those acquisitions and opportunities to come. Smaller providers are going to feel a bit more of the pressure as we evolve in this marketplace. Some of the stats suggest that close to 50% of our market kind of is in that less than 500 home care package scale. And in a relatively low margin business, I sense that these are the providers that are going to start feeling a bit of the pressure. They may need to revisit their model if they want to remain kind of viable and competitive, like you mentioned, Chris. So the marketplace certainly will continue in a consolidation phase, I feel. From a funding perspective, look, I think the introduction of the price list will kind of see, funding being spent, I guess, as intended, funding being spent directly in care, with some question marks around, how care management is treated. But I think the challenge is really going to be how we all navigate the system when the care needs of our clients change. And we all know that those care needs can change, dramatically and quite sharply from time to time as well. Workforce. That's, I think, it's kind of the $1 million question. Where are the staff going to be coming from, and what can we do as a sector to attract, workforce into our sector? So, obviously the pay and conditions certainly make a huge difference. There's a fair work case going on at the moment that's going to make a difference. But attracting staff into our sector, immigration is certainly going to help that as well. But then keeping them here. What does our EVP look like? And ensuring that as we recruit and onboard staff into our sector, we're setting the correct expectations for them so that they are engaged and they stay within the workforce. I guess to your question around where does home care sit strategically with HammondCare, and I think home cares are very important to the overall HammondCare strategy, as is all of our other services, because it's through kind of our diverse experience that we can fulfill our mission to improve quality of life for people in need, and home care is certainly a big part of that at HammondCare. I think you're on mute there, Chris.
Sorry, I had myself on mute. Ravi, could you please drill a little deeper, please, on the price list component? Many of the audience will be aware, but some will not.
Yeah, so obviously moving away from a subsidy-based funding system to a price list system, as we've seen in kind of NDIS, is certainly going to shift how people kind of model, I guess, their financials and their business. But as we know, currently we're getting a subsidy rate on a daily basis allocated to a home care package. Going forward, these home care packages are all going to disappear, and we're all going to get funding based on the actual services that we deliver. And the price lists are going to determine what those services are, the sort of classification of that service, and the unit price that each of those services will attract.
Will you have ability to vary that price?
So no, from what we understand, no. So the government is going to be setting the price. Obviously, there's been consultation being had with the government and providers around, what the cost base is to providing each of those classified services. But then the government will be setting those prices, and we would have to then kind of look at what those prices are, what our mix of services are, and then address what sort of funding we're going to be receiving.
Do you or any of the other panelists have a view on how likely the government will fix a price that suits everybody from a large operator down to a small operator?
I guess from my point of view, the current studies that the government has conducted around cost of delivery has been with a very small sample of providers. They haven't extensively gone across the board, we've got 900 plus providers that have gone across the board to look at a whole range of providers, including kind of regional and remote providers as well, to get to a cost price. So I think that's kind of something that should be considered to look at a costing study across a larger range or a larger sample size. But from the data that we've currently got, I think it's probably not sufficient to be able to make an assessment on price lists just based on sample size.
So you're a finance man. Does that keep you awake at night? I mean, you're modelling your business on that pricing, aren't you?
Look, it certainly does. It's certainly a concern around what those prices are going to be set at. At the moment, we don't have a view of the prices that we're going to be setting out. What we've been communicated is the cost analysis that's been done. So we still don't have a view. We've got some estimates and some indications, but until we communicated in full what those prices are going to be, it makes modelling that much difficult.
Have you got an idea as to when there might be some more clarity?
I don't think we've got a definite answer on when that price list is going to come out. We've got a timetable which the government has released, which I don't think they're meeting at the moment. But kind of given we're in the election cycle at the moment, that might be delayed even further.
And obviously a large component of that is going to be the cost of workforce, and we're waiting on the Fair Work announcement on that.
That's correct.
So there's a significant amount of uncertainty still in the marketplace.
Look, I think there is. There's certainly uncertainty around kind of workforce, where the workforce is going to come from. There's certainly uncertainty about the funding models and how those models are going to impact business viability and competition. But I also think the dust kind of hasn't settled on some of the other reform that's occurred over the last 18 months as well. Improved payment arrangements and so forth. So the impacts of those that have on our clients, I feel is a little bit underestimated also, because the clients have gone through a significant amount of change, over the last couple of years, including COVID, and now we're kind of introducing a further change for them to navigate in. So if it's kind of not confusing, if it's confusing to us, you can only feel for the clients as well.
If I can come back to the pricing, because if the government is establishing a price, let's call it a mid-market price, that's going to challenge smaller operators that may not have the systems in place that the government would assume. It might benefit the larger ones that do have the systems in place. Is that a fair statement?
I think it's a broad assumption at this stage, Chris. I don't think the government's intent here is to put anyone out of business or to squeeze smaller providers and force consolidation onto the sector. I think there's some great organisations out there that do great things. So I think we're just kind of basing those calculations on some assumptions. I think what'll be better is if we get some hard data from the government that gives us a fair idea of what they're trying to introduce in terms of price lists, and that's going to give us what we need to make these assessments.
An interesting point in that is when you talk about the client has gone through a lot of change. For the audience, what is the average length of time that you have a client in home care? What is their average time with you, and what have you got a view on what it may be in the future, given that you have this earlier access?
Yeah, look, it really depends on kind of the entry point into home care, and as we're seeing that a lot of people are starting to get home care services very early in their care journey. The Commonwealth Home Support Program really encourages that as well. I think over time, there's a bit more, focus on independence. Like we've seen self-management and self-navigation through part of the sector as well. So I think those averages don't kind of tell the best story of what the future will bring. It's really about kind of two segments of the home care market. People that are able to look after themselves and want to be, part of the controlled decision making, and then the vulnerable in our community that need further assistance, that may have complex care needs, that really need help to navigate through the system.
Actually, you made a good point earlier that the care needs change for a client in that journey. Under the new home support program and the requirements, the tails wagging the dog, can you outline your understanding of how closely you have to be able to report and what responsibilities you have in terms of managing the client's needs?
Yeah, look, I think from a client needs management perspective, to be fair, I don't think much is going to change from a client service perspective. I think our care managers, our community workers, they're going to continue to look after our clients the best possible way they can. I think the challenge is going to be on our side from a funding and financial model perspective to make sure that we're modeled to support that behavior. If we're not going to get funded for specific, activities, then we need to kind of work out how to best kind of manage that. But from a care perspective, I don't think that, that's going to be front of mind for our care managers and our care workers that are looking after the clients.
And you have views on this area in terms of tracking clients in their care journey, and how the person in the field has a responsibility, and therefore the operator has a responsibility to have been seen to identify a change, respond to it, account for it, and deliver a best outcome.
Yeah, look, I think the collection of data is very important in that space, to make sure that we've got up-to-date data, and we're not making it difficult for our care workers and our staff to monitor that information, and then having, oversight of that data, provide you that information to take responsibility should anything occur, or should you see something that may need kind of appropriate action. But I do think that the collection, the use, and availability of data is important here.
Anna, can you add to that?
I was actually just going to add something just to what Ravi was saying before, if you don't mind, just before we go to that other question. Just on the pricing, when we're talking about bigger providers maybe being the ones that are more stable, then I think there is also some assumptions around that. In smaller providers can often, they don't have necessarily the larger infrastructure and the overheads that it would cost to maintain a much larger buildings and workforce and lots of cars and all of the other, software and whatever else they actually require. A number of the providers that I work with are quite small, and they have maybe, 2 or 3 people working in the organisation, and that their actual overheads are quite low. The other point I wanted just to mention is that the government, in terms of the consultation around identifying prices and cost unit pricing, they've been able to, for a number of years through the HammondCare website, have actually been able to monitor the pricing of those top 5 service types for home care providers for a number of years now, and be able to get those averages across the sector for a number of years. And added to that has also been the dollar figure that was added for care management by each provider and for package management. And then subsequent to that, so they've been able to keep an eye on that as well and get some averages, as well as looking at the payment in arrears, where the actual account is coming to the department and they're paying what they've seen the provider is charging to the consumer for against their package. So I think there's actually some more incidental oversight that's been happening and from the government perspective. So even though it might look like there hasn't been as much direct consultation, I think the sector themselves have provided an enormous amount of data for the government to be able to review those unit prices.
So you are optimistic about the pricing situation?
I don't know. I'm not sure that I would really be able to make a comment on that specifically. I mean, I'm an optimist at heart anyway, so I'll always think about that. But I think there's going to be it won't necessarily be just the larger. I don't know whether the larger providers are necessarily going to have an easier time at being able to manage a unit price if the unit price is actually a little lower than they are currently operating at. So there might be some difficulties, but I hope that with the accumulation of the data that's been able to be pulled out of the back end of My Aged Care, as well as any of the information that's come through with the invoicing directly to the department in the last couple of months, then that might give some indication of a range of pricing that is currently in the sector at the moment.
Ravi mentioned self-managed, and last night you and I were discussing the requirement on operators to have captured all interactions by people in the field, and that can include community workers. For the audience, can you just overview that journey again, or that vision that you had last night of a client receiving services from several people and how the operator needs to collect that data?
Absolutely. This is one, well, when it comes to the ability of any provider of home care services to be able to report, they need to be able to gather data from the field. So whether it's having opportunities for support workers themselves, family members, the consumer themselves, to not only understand what information they need to capture on any given day, but then the ability to report that back to their provider so that there can be the next steps that get taken. So if there's a deterioration of health or an incident or a hazard or just anything that's actually happening that might trigger a response from the home care provider, by understand there's two parts to that. One is around communicating and educating the support workers and the clients and family members on what they need to be on the lookout for. But the second and most important part also is the technological ability for them to then hand that information in a timely way back to the provider. Once it gets to the provider, there needs to be a notification and an alert so that then that can get followed through in a consistent way, in a systematic way, and it as efficiently as possible. So from a business, when I visit providers who have wanting to prepare for a quality review in advance, or subsequently if they've had a quality assessment from the or a contact assessment from the commission and they've got some not mets or non-compliance, usually what they're finding is they can have great systems, great processes, policies and procedures that are fabulous, but if the practice doesn't match the policies and procedures, this is where the disconnect is starting to really show up. And we see that coming through in the aged care sector performance data reports, where every quarter the Quality and Safety Commission produce the report, which is retrospective, but it looks at what are the top 10 non-compliances in that previous quarter. And we see very, very consistently it's coming through the same way. We're seeing standards 2 and 3 around assessment and care planning, and but on the ground, what that means in practice is that very often we're seeing a misalignment between the needs of the consumer and the delivery of care and the implementation of services and supports that are appropriate to that client. In addition to that, we're also seeing the top 10 complaints data and the way that actually gets put together from the Commission's perspective in terms of theming that up. And the relationship between the complaints data and the non-compliance data is quite clear around lack of consultation and communication, the financial systems, fees and charges, financial management, that's a huge area. And also just around the care and services and the implementation of care and services and the alignment between needs and actual services being supplied. So with all of those things, the only way to capture that is to have the data, and it's that how do you collect the data that is really the biggest issue. for providers regardless of the size. Sometimes the larger providers have got more software in place, but there is definitely capacity for smaller providers to be able to do that as well.
We might come back to that top 10 because it's a really interesting insight. But John, you've made a career out of collecting data in the field. So can you've invested the last 10 years, 30 years you've been in the sector, but the last 5 to 7 to 10 years for checked-in care, building something that is best in purpose. So can you explain your system as an app that is available to operators that can then also work in with various systems like Epicors to show that collecting that data is not as hard as it sounds? Because to my mind, it sounds horrifying to have all these people in the field in a dynamic environment collecting data.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, I've been in working tech sector for 30 years, and most of that's 29 of that has been in the care sector. But most of the challenges that we hear about, and also the challenges have been presented here in terms of customer experience for clients and staff, streamlining the workflow, giving visibility to the clients of what's possible, getting clients early in the care journey and managing that whole continuum or the client journey, or what we call continuum of care. Those solutions exist in other industries, and they have for many, many, many years. And so part of the reason why we kicked off Checked-in Care 7 years ago was to provide that same capability and solution to clients and their families and staff in this sector. The big challenge we've always had in this sector is going back 7, 8 years ago, the systems, and a lot of the providers back then, it was a bit of a cottage industry, and it was the connectivity to those systems that was always a challenge. But that was the problem that we solved, and we solved that well. And a lot of that is also based on the willingness of the vendor partners, companies like Epicor, to actually work to solve those issues and solve those connectivity issues. Because we've helped solve that issue and provided that customer care experience platform, we now have over 150,000 people using our software in the field, and therefore providing that window or that interface, not only to receive all the information they need to know to best manage, whether it's their own care or the family member helping mum manage her own care, but also for staff as well. And because initially it was all about giving visibility to staff and clients, what we're now seeing, particularly with the new support at home framework requirements, is the ability now for the clients to push that information back, and for staff to push that information back into their core systems like Epicor, and providing that reporting and analysis required for supported decisions by the management in the areas. If I sort of just touch on an example, the 2 or 3 examples come to mind based on what Anna was saying is, the issue around some of the common complaints in the care sector that are coming back through the quality compliance, and Anna mentioned assessment and care planning. There's a lot of discussion in the support at home framework around self-management. We actually refer to it a lot in terms of self-navigation. It's giving the client the ability to actually highlight what's important to them, giving them the ability to understand how to navigate the system, to build their own care plans, build their own support services, build their priorities, understand what the budget looks like, so that when the assessment happens, they're actually pre-prepared, whether it's them or their family members or their supported decision makers, they're pre-informed when that assessment happens. So the assessor is much more likely to understand what's important to that individual. And that's where our technology is helping at the moment. But largely where we've been very fortunate is because we've driven that customer experience, we have the app in the hands of the people. So getting the clients to build to provide that information back is really just been the next step in our evolution.
Just so I can make clarity for the audience, we're talking about having an app on the phone, which is the client has it, the family has it, and that the workforce has it, and that all feeds back into a central database, collects the data.
That's correct.
And visually, that appears as a number of icons so that the the worker or the family member, whatever, can just click on the icon and that will deliver them each of the components that they need. And built into that is video communication if required, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all around that simplicity of having a tool that those three individuals, the worker, the client, and the family, collect data themselves, which then feeds back to, let's say, an Epicor. Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Chris. So we'll connect into the care management system, provide the care information, the finance system, provide the invoices, statements, the compliance system, provide that information to staff, the feedback and complaint system, provide that the ability for that interaction with staff as well. So as an example, in practice, was also mentioned around, workforce, is we hear from a lot of our provider partners that it takes, on average 5 phone calls to implement a simple request around, I need a gardener. And we have heard from providers with this workforce shortages, that has increased from 5 calls. And I was only last week talking to one of the providers, they're averaging 20 phone calls now to average a standard service. So that's where technology and what we're seeing happen now is by allowing the client to directly liaise with those workers is taking that workload away from your back-end systems and providers, because we simply now allow the client to see their services, order their services, populate the scheduling system with that request, and then once a transaction happens, directly talk through to the Epicor care planning and finance system to record that transaction.
So, Greg, checked-in care is a market-leading application, but it's one of a number in delivering different components of the care support, the care journey. The role of Epicor and others of Epicor type services is to provide that the base for all these operating systems. Am I right in thinking of it that way?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Chris. If you think of a system like Epicor Senior Living Solution as an ERP for aged care, it's a central database that manages all the workflows and processes within the aged care provider or community care provider. So single client record is the one mandate that all our customers tell us. We need to have that single record. So sitting in the middle, like the hub of the ERP, takes data in from systems like Checked-in Care with John and our partnership with John, and also many, many other systems. So there's inputs and outputs. Customers tell us that it needs to be simple, it needs to be quick, and they need to have visibility of decisions that they're making throughout their organisation from end to end, whether that be in finance or through to delivery of care or simple operations within the organisation. So Epicor sits in the middle, like similar solutions. However, what we've done is designed this system that is both easy to use and modern and very interoperable. So connections and interconnectivity is everything in aged care today. Being able to take all these disparate systems, there are upwards of 30 different systems to run an aged care provider. So I'm sure Ravi would know that those systems have to be connected. You can't rely on that scale on offline systems or simple spreadsheets to do that. So the maturity of the aged care organisation, we're seeing this growing. We're seeing a lot of demands from our customers to ensure that we provide that interoperability as well as that single client record that flows all the way through.
How do if I'm an aged care operator, an existing home care operator, let's say, I have a number of legacy systems and so on that my workforce is accustomed to, my management is accustomed to getting their reports that way and so on. Between Checked-in Care and Epicor and the other 30 odd that you mentioned, how do I go about that? Am I stuck with what you've got, or can the people watching this webinar still have input in what their future system looks like?
No, that's probably one of the mandates is customer first. So we work very closely with customers like HammondCare as a customer of Epicor, and we take their feedback and input into what the systems need to deliver both now and down into the future in our technology stack that we're developing. some of those simple things like automation through to artificial intelligence are great buzzwords, but in reality, to be able to deploy that to give the efficiency within the organisation. But the mandate is that the existing systems that a customer have to integrate with the ERP or replace some of those components where you don't obviously want duplication in your system, and you want to have simple, easy to use systems. I think it comes back to one of the biggest issues today is, of course, workforce. And it's both attraction and retention of workforce are two significant issues that I think we're facing more so globally than we have in many decades before to try and attract and retain staff. What we're hearing and what our customers are telling us is that our systems need to be very easy to use. We need to interpret the compliance requirements and deliver that to the providers in a way that they can adopt, understand, model out, test, and deliver that to their clients. And then it comes back to that feedback loop, customers telling us, hey, we need refinements. And so we work very closely with the industry to refine our system to meet both current and up and coming compliance requirements.
I hear of staff questioning an operator on what their operating systems are before they join because they don't want to learn something new. So that, I mean, it's like the airline industry used to be, they had 2 operating systems around the world, and therefore staff could transition from one agency to another. Are you finding the same, Ravi? And
Ravi, you take that?
I haven't directly heard about that in regards to staff asking about operating systems, but I'm sure it occurs because obviously that transition into a new role we've seen in other sectors as well, where knowing a system and a process prior to entering that role is certainly an advantage. But I think kind of from Greg's perspective and even John's, I guess the technology is moving so quickly in terms of its advancement, and these days I guess there's an expectation that if you're able to use an iPhone, then you're able to kind of jump in and use some of these apps because they're quite intuitive. It's really making sure that the back end also continues to support the user experience on the front end.
And on the one hand, the world is moving fast, but really we're all still marching to the government drumbeat, aren't we, in terms of connectivity and one client record?
But from my perspective, yes, I believe so. But I also think that agility in our systems and our technologies is going to be key for the future. Support at home is just the beginning of the involvement of home care. So we're going to see different versions of support at home and changes as we go. So the ability to have kind of agility within our systems is certainly going to be key as the government does pivot around what is the best way that we provide these services.
Yeah, I think that agility, I'd love to pick up on that word, Ravi, because agility is everything at the moment in technology, being able to adapt to both a competitive nature and the changing workforce demands. In about just under a week from now, Epicor will be launching some new technology at our global conference in the US. And this is a piece of software that enables integrations to be built by the user, if need be, up to IT to decide who has that sort of access. But we're moving to systems where users can create their own integrations and connections rather than have to rely on an IT team that may take weeks, months, or sometimes longer to create those integrations. So this has come about from customer demand, both here and particularly in aged care, but also worldwide, where customers are telling us they need to be able to integrate everything and have that data flow seamlessly so that decisions can be made, reports can be generated, and dashboards can be viewed live and with real-time information so that the individuals can make decisions. And then the mandate is that must be simple to use.
And then if you wrap onto that the customer experience, the ability for the customer to build their own care experience. Yeah. Because platforms like ours that connect all these back-end systems actually does give the client and their family members to build their own care experience, which is really beating to the government drum of, you know, client-directed, client-designed care system or care outcomes.
In relation to getting back to our mantra of data, 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 Anna, let's return to the top 10. You identify that the government release of the top 10 areas of challenge don't change much, but when you consult with clients, you see that they are at times, you know, ignoring, you know, what the government is saying. These are the areas you must attend. Can you overview those 3 prime areas for the audience?
Sure. So look, I guess just to say, yes, they haven't really changed much over time, which is quite surprising in some respects, because this data is made available to providers to enable them to reflect on their own practice against the issues that are happening at a broader sector level. So certainly, whether it's software or training or whatever it happens to be able to address these issues, that's really a critical point, I think, moving forward for all providers. But those 3 main themes really do centre around, well, number 1 is almost exclusively every quarter around lack of consultation or communication. And that features then throughout the top 10 in various spots in different iterations, I suppose. So lack of consultation and communication is the number 1 area. The other one is around...
So that's lack of consultation and communication with the client and the family.
Yes, that's right. And in fact, it's worth mentioning too that most of the time in the home care space, the number of complaints going to the Commission is almost a 50-50 split between the consumer themselves or a family member or representative. So it's, you know, almost down the line. In fact, sometimes it is exactly 50%. Whereas in residential care, it's completely different in the way that it's actually, the number of people, who the complaints come from is very, very different. But in home care, it's very much around the messaging, and the information is not just about the consumer. It is also equally as important is the what are we providing in information that's in a relatable format for family members and other people that are involved in their care, because we can see that half the time the complaints are coming from that side of it. So really understanding your market is absolutely critical. The second one was around financial systems, financial management, fees and charges. And the third major sort of theme in the complaints is around care services, care planning and assessment type areas where people are feeling that they're not getting the services and supports that they believe are necessary for their care. So they're the types of areas. And I think when we were talking a bit before around what to expect with support at home, one of the ways that I often have spoken to providers is just to look at what that customer experience or consumer objectives are from the government's perspective. So they put out some fact sheet for support at home, which outlines to consumers, this is what we're trying to achieve with our support at home transition and reform. And at the other end of that, we've got what we know providers need to address in terms of organisational governance and their ability to perform against the individual requirements of the standards. So there are some things that we know that are quite set, and then everything else in between is really about the individual providers' ways of working. This is where they get to be innovative. This is where they get to put their best foot forward and to utilise different types of technology, or to have a point of difference for their customers and the consumers and family members that maybe others don't have. But it gives everyone a chance to really put their own mark on their organisation. And just one more thing I think is also worth mentioning is that understanding for some providers who don't have a lot of information about or don't really understand what's happening in the sector as much at the moment, that there is so much support from the Department of Health sector support, sector support, and also just from the member supports that are available through the peak bodies as well, and whether it's consumer peaks as well as the provider peaks. And I think it's worth really reinforcing that there is assistance to understand what's needed and then also financial assistance for some providers in the thin markets for preparing themselves for what's coming as well.
Anna, you are a consultant for ACSA as well as having your own consulting business, HomeCare headquarters. What, how are you feeling about the competition scenario for the smaller regional, even the smaller metropolitan operators, home care operators? Given that we're 13, 14 months away, are you feeling optimistic that the opportunities are there, or do you feel that they're challenged?
I think it's a bit of both, really. And it's a matter of then really understanding what it is about their own individual ways of working that we were discussing before, the bits that sit in between what the objectives of the department are and what the objectives of the commission are, and really understanding, well, what is it that we can do with how we deliver care and services, understanding whether you're in a niche market or creating a niche for yourself, and then really understanding how to put that information across to potential consumers. One of the things I also notice is that there's a lot of work done on potential consumers and perhaps not as much done on retaining existing consumers that are already part of your organisation, and that there might even be opportunities for, in smaller markets, for much more consolidation and collaboration between providers. I was in New South Wales last week with rural service providers in that, doing some workshops, and there was so much support and collaboration in the room. These providers cannot survive on their own to a large extent, where they need to actually lean on each other to get workers and share workforce and share vehicles and share spaces where they can actually have workers come and spend some time in between shifts if they're in a smaller town. There's a lot that can be done, and so I think we're going to see a lot more opportunities for providers to reach out to each other, set networks up in these areas, and really utilise the supports and that each other can provide to their counterparts, because no one wants to see anybody failing. There's enough clients to go around for everybody, and it would be great to see that there's more being done to support that, I think, from a sector perspective. And
your message, given that this new program comes in 14 months' time?
Well, I guess like anything, the time to act is now, and there's a lot of opportunities. Take advantage of the free webinars, take advantage of the other training sessions and anything that's available in the sector to really familiarise themselves with what's required and start those conversations early.
The reality is there are systems and supports and people in place who can guide operators now. But Greg, how many new clients can Epicor take on in 14 months? If I could ask a curly question.
Yeah, look, we have been preparing for this, and for quite a while. We deal with the compliance issues ongoing, and that's our one promise to our customers. That's our major promise to our customers. We will help you meet compliance, and we'll do that with plenty of time to spare. We've got quite an extensive network. Epicor here in Australia also supported. We're a global organisation of over 4,000 staff. We're specialists at aged care here in the ANZ market, of course, but we also have a partner network that we leverage here, who are dedicated Epicor specialists in aged care. So we believe we've got the capacity, but I wouldn't like everyone to hit us up at the same time. Work with us, talk to us. As we're out talking to our customers all the time, and whether it be helping them solve technical issues or understanding their views on the markets or needs, and preparing. And that one message that we do say is, please give us warning. We only have so many resources available, but we're building systems, and this is where cloud comes into it. Cloud takes a lot of the headache away, particularly from upgrading. And whilst we're happy to support our on-premise customers, and we continue to develop the same technology in cloud and on-premise, moving to cloud means that those upgrades are a lot more seamless. Your IT team is not so dependent on upgrading hardware and the underlying architecture and software that's got to run on that. and it's quite a simple process to upgrade. But don't get me wrong, you still need to test before we go live, but it takes a lot of that burden away. It ensures compliance and ensures making the most out of your software spend to keep the latest software available.
And John, the time it takes to onboard a new client?
And in terms of the ability to scale rapidly, Chris, I mean, as an example, our business has doubled in the last 4 months. And that would break and kill quite a few businesses. But because we're cloud-based, because we actually connect to the client source of truth like Epicor, etc., and Epicor deal with all the compliance issues, we deal with all the privacy and customer and client privacy issues. The ability for us to scale rapidly is a lot more easier for us than it would be for some other providers. So the typical time to implement is we deployed all of Bupa to all their families and all their staff within 3 weeks during Easter of 2020, as an example, through to a full home care deployment. We're integrating with maybe 10, 12 systems that can take up to 3 months.
Yeah. So again, there's a runway that's really required.
That's right. Correct.
And Ravi, we're coming to the end of our time. You made the point repeatedly that everything is workforce. Have you got a bright horizon for our audience?
Look, I do. I think it's a multifaceted approach, and I think the discussions that we're having are quite honest ones around, pay, benefits, EVP. How do we keep people in our workforce, and obviously the importance of aged care in our country. And I think these are great conversations to be had that puts a focus on the sector and allows people to enter the workforce with passion, knowing that they're going to be looked after and knowing that they're going to be doing meaningful work supported by organizations and technologies that are going to help their development. So I'm positive on that outlook. But like I said, it is a multifaceted approach, and obviously a lot of people have said this before, but there's no silver bullet. So we'll just keep working at it.
And a major part of the solution is increased wages, because we're in a competitive environment. Has HammondCare got a view as to where those wages need to go?
I think I'm certainly supportive of the current Fair Work case that's ongoing, and I believe putting kind of aged care staff wages in line with the likes of NDIS at the moment is certainly going in the right direction. So we're fully supportive of a wage increase for aged care staff, certainly. And
the plan B, where we get increased co-contribution, only, 10% of home care is funded by the client at this point in time. Have you, when you're doing your back of envelope financial planning, have you got an idea of what you'd like?
It's a tricky one, right? Co-contributions, particularly given, I guess, some of the areas that we operate in, and some of the I guess areas where there's higher population density and lower socioeconomics. The affordability factor of clients being able to contribute, it comes to question, and also with the increased cost of living pressures, we do have to consider how much can clients contribute to their care without kind of putting further pressure on themselves. So those back of the envelope calculations are becoming more challenging around client contributions as well.
And so John's concept of workforce is everywhere. We're going to have to engage with family members, community carers and so on, and embrace them in our system to make sure that we've got people who can deliver care. Is that a fair summary?
I think it is a fair summary, and to some extent, I believe that already kind of happens in aspects of care. We've seen kind of in our palliative care side, that families certainly do get involved as part of the process. But I think making sure that that expertise, the training, the education that's required to deliver more of the complex care needs is still there as a foundation to care delivery. And the family members and the carers are part of that journey, but I still think we need a foundation of expertise in that area.
Thank you very much. Greg, I haven't asked you whether you have any questions as we're rolling up to 1 hour.
Well, just pick up on a couple of the questions from the audience. The first one, back to probably early conversation. Do you see customers preferring self-managed funds more, but particularly in the low care segments? Maybe Ravi, do you see self-managed funds being asked for more and more?
I guess HammondCare's position on self-managed, we kind of don't play in the self-managed market. It's maybe more of a question for John, but I see from an industry perspective that there is more and more clients kind of entering that self-managed, self-navigation market. And
from our side, Greg, we're getting a lot of questions from customers that saying we need to look at self-management, we need to do a pilot in self-management. But we consistently hear that less than 15% of clients are actually able to self-manage, and therefore it's actually more of a load on the providers to train and educate those clients around self-management. So we talk a lot around self-navigating, so helping through technology for those clients to self-navigate, because there's unfortunately some providers look at it's either self-managed or fully not, it's one or the other. But it's actually a continuum, has been our experience for our provider partners. There's a continuum of self-management. So giving people the ability to choose the bits they want to do themselves and the bits they don't. And that's where technology is a major enabler.
I've missed the context of this next question, but let's give
Can I just add something to that last question first, Greg? Sorry. This self-management is kind of my thing as well. So I was the project manager for the COTA self-management project a number of years ago. And so what I see, and I continue to get calls from consumers and from home care providers wanting to explore self-management. And I think similar to what John was saying, that there is and has been an assumption in many cases that self-management has to then attract a lower fee in order for it to seem like for the person to be able to get extra value out of their package. And whilst I think that can work from that in some respects is not really the thing that most of the consumers that were in our pilot were most interested in. What they wanted is they wanted autonomy. They wanted to have options and choices presented to them that then they could participate in. They wanted to be able to have more choice and control over the support workers or where they were purchasing services from, have a little bit more control if they wanted to buy an item and then have it reimbursed as long as it sat within their care plan and budget. So a lot of what we saw was that self-management kind of was starting to get some momentum in the sector, and then it dropped off at the same time that the guidance, there was no real guidance for providers to know how to implement self-management. So, and then the system changed from a compliance perspective. So there's actually quite a lot that can be demonstrated to consumers. They just want to have, and family members, they want to have information. They want to understand the sector that has been set up to support and serve them. So providing more support, providing more information, giving feedback, educating them, and even helping them to sign up for newsletters or attending webinars like this. There's a whole lot that people just want to be involved in and have more information. And that can often be as much as that can be enough for people just to have that sense of self-determination and autonomy, not necessarily at a cheaper rate, because they often value the case management as well.
So you're saying not so much fully self-managed, but choice, being able to exercise choice throughout the process.
Yeah, because self-management really does we have self-management in just about every other sector, and superannuation and compensable injury and NDIS and all sorts of things. But within the context of an aged care sector, we need to create something that's actually going to give all of the benefits and the features of self-management, but make them integral to what all providers are delivering, so that everybody feels like they've actually got that support and choice and information to make their own decisions.
And maybe a follow-up question, it could be related. How much will the client's ability to purchase goods and services be impacted?
This is under supported home, is that
Yeah,
related?
I believe that relates.
Maybe Ravi, that might be one as a direct service provider.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think there's avenues for items to be purchased under the new system. I think what's more going to be impacted is providers' ability to kind of either cash flow that, the impacts on working capital for those providers. Some of the items that we see clients purchase are quite high in value. So to be able to kind of go through a purchase claim process may have an impact on working capital for some of the smaller providers. But I don't think it's going to, disadvantage clients. I don't think that's ever the intent of the system.
Okay, Chris, and I don't know that we'll be able to get through all of the questions because I know we're running over time. But if you would like, we can take some more, or do we need to cut off?
We're happy to continue on for a few more minutes, and we will provide written answers to many of the questions that are being left.
Okay, there's one here on, Anna, did you have a point?
Yeah, I was just going to add to Ravi's comment as well. And I think in some ways, I think there might actually be some consequences for consumers, because there is, what we're often seeing is that providers, that there seems to be an assumption that home care packages mostly provide hours of care and hours of service, but the whole purpose of the way that the system was set up was to provide flexibility to purchase ad hoc items, or to support a client to maybe have some, taxi vouchers or other bits and pieces that are not hours of care. And so if we're talking hours of care, the new system is going to work okay to a large extent. But when it comes to some of those other products and services and items that are not necessarily going to be, that someone might not even realise they need during that assessment phase, that's going to where we'll start to see some difficulties, not having that necessarily that flexibility of some additional funds that can be dropped in at the right time for the right service or items, and that potentially could have some impact on clients. Having an initial assessment, most of the clients that I speak to in my advisory groups, they have made it pretty clear they wouldn't have really had a clue what they needed up front. And so having that information, they wouldn't have known. They're going to have to keep going back into the assessment system to continuously be updated to get the supports that they need. And I think a lot of people will just think it's just too hard to then say, how do we backfill taxi vouchers for, once a week or once a month into this care plan. I think there's potential to be some disruption for sure.
Yeah, look, I agree with that, Anna. I think that kind of just spotlights the importance of that assessment process and that ongoing kind of relationship with your clients to make sure that we are, upfront about, all of the items that they're going to need and the care that they're going to need. And, if it's part of the assessment plan, then it gets, called out earlier. But you're right, there may be some challenges if people aren't necessarily being assessed, for what they may need in the future. That's going to pose some challenges for sure.
Mm.
Okay, Chris, and maybe if we allow the audience one more question before we wrap up. Is there or will there be a governance on the fees that providers are charging on top of the services fees when the list price is launched? Will there be any controls over charging excess fees on top of list?
I don't think we've got an opportunity to charge fees over and above what the price list is going to be. From what we know, the listed price is going to be an amount inclusive of kind of your admin or your overhead component, and that's the price that we're going to get funded for each of those services delivered. So I don't think we're going to have an opportunity to charge fees and charges on top of the list price.
Right. So you're imagining that we won't see another line item that says service provider charge of 10% or whatever it might be.
No.
Okay.
Well, not if it's going to be coming out of the government's pocket, but if there's potential that a provider could, I suppose, in theory, charge that if a client is absolutely determined to have a certain product or item or service, then if they want to pay themselves over and above to top up perhaps that amount, then I guess that would be an option. I don't know for sure, but I'm just saying, well, I don't see why not.
Yeah, top-ups, certainly, if they wanted to contribute, it comes back to Chris's point on co-contribution. Obviously, there's providers that provide private services as well. Private services providers may be able to determine their own fees, but as per the price list, I think the price list is what it is.
Well, I think we're coming up to 12 Sydney time. So, Greg, if there are more questions there, we might distribute those with answers so that those people asking the questions get what they're after. But if I can summarise, we're 12 to 14 months away from the Support at Home program. It is going to be a major change for the sector. It is going to introduce greater competition, but it's also going to introduce a greater number of customers. It's rewarding to hear Anna's advice that the small to medium operators, whilst they'll have to get their skates on, that they do have a great opportunity to innovate, to identify their true value propositions, and that they can be competitive, and that we do have a local workforce. To be ready for the new program, it is essential that you are having the conversations with your leadership team now about what the objective is, where you want to be positioned, and then developing the software and IT programs to achieve those objectives, and start talking to the potential providers of those tools now, because there's approximately 500 to 600 operators who are in this position trying to decide where they go now. So time is against us. So thank you very much to our panel. So Anna Millicer, Ravi Sharma, John Perkins, and Greg Alone. Thank you very much to the 300 plus attendees, and we'll speak again. Take care.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Take care all.